Now, let me say the quiet part out loud. If you go online right now on social media, LinkedIn, X, OpenClaw is being marketed like it's a download this and you have a digital employee. But in reality, that is not how it works in real life. You can do a demo, but when it comes to production, it's different. Also, if you're non-technical, the setup alone can be like a brick in the wall, right? Or even if you are technical, you can still spend time debugging things that have nothing to do with the actual goal. And the biggest myth about all this is that people think that because it's open source, people automatically assume it's free. No, it's not. So today I'm breaking down what a hype skips, what nobody's really talking about on social media, why the setup is not beginner friendly at all, why you don't need a Mac mini, but you do need a plan, why costs add up fast, and why security is a part everyone hand waves until it bites them. So let's get started. So let me set context here with what OpenClaw promises versus what it really is, right? First of all, I just want to make it clear, I'm not here to hate on the project because I've been setting this up for people. I've been setting it up for myself. I actually like weird, ambitious tools. I want this category to win so bad because I do think that this is where we are going to in the age of AI. But I also hate it when creators or influencers sell a fantasy that turns into a whole weekend pain for regular people because the setup can be a nightmare, honestly. OpenClaw is essentially an agent orchestration setup, right? You're wiring together a runtime environment, multiple tools, model providers, triggers, permissions, credentials, and some UI or operational layers so that you can control and monitor it. And that is not the same as installing an app, okay? That's closer to operating a small system. So if someone is online and they're pitching it like anyone can do this in 10 minutes, they're honestly skipping the hard part, and most likely they haven't set it up themselves, so they probably don't know that the setup isn't easy. The first myth out there is people say that you don't need to be technical. It's for non-technical people. But here's the part influencers just gloss over. The setup is not a standard setup. And I've been trying this, I've been resetting this app for multiple people and I keep running into errors. It's not like signing into a dashboard and toggling a few settings. You're actually dealing with real things, okay? Like sometimes you may get an error you didn't get in the previous setup, right? You're dealing with real things like environment variables that must be correct, multiple API keys, network details. I'm talking about URLs, pods, secure endpoint. I'm talking about Docker and containers or even service managers, file system paths and permissions, log, restarts, and updates. The list can go on and on and on. And when something breaks, it doesn't even break politely. It breaks like something can't connect, or maybe token mismatch, or maybe the service is not running, or maybe wrong directory, can't find config, insecure WebSocket URL, permission denied. Oh my God, so many errors, guys, and it's not easy to debug. And so if you don't understand commands, you don't understand folders and what a process is doing, you're going to be stuck immediately. Now, I want to be super clear here. Being non-technical doesn't necessarily mean you're not smart, okay? In the age of AI, to be honest, like you can always use ChatGPT to clarify things. You can use Claude to clarify things. So it doesn't mean you're not smart, okay? It just means that this tool assumes knowledge that most people don't have, okay? And I'm talking about things like how to inspect logs, how to edit config safely, how to restart a gateway service, how to confirm what's listening on a pod, how to keep secrets from leaking, how to reason about where data is flowing. There's so many things that the OpenClaw setup assumes people must have, but they don't necessarily have, right? So that's not like a moral judgment, that's just an expectation mismatch. So I just want to bring in a perspective that perfectly captures the experience, okay? So I saw this post on Reddit, okay? A veteran developer wrote a long critique after actually spending time with the OpenClaw project. And they did admit that at first they were excited, they spun up models, they built skills, they started experimenting, and then they hit the reality. Interesting ideas, rough executions. So one part that matters a lot for beginners is the structure. And this isn't really obvious, right? So their breakdown, let me go through their breakdown, okay? So their breakdown was basically the fact that there's a main folder. Inside it, there are workspaces. Then inside workspaces, there are agents. And then agents contain skills and tools do the work, okay? So skills are supposed to guide tool usage. So that sounds very reasonable on paper until you start doing some real execution. Because when a trigger fires, like a chat or a cron job, the system stacks a huge amount of context. Okay. We are talking about things like system prompts, agents prompts, skill prompts, tool prompts, and then it only then tries to do the task, right? So the analogy was basically like this. Just imagine trying to do a simple task, but then you're forced to reread multiple instructions all over again. Okay. You're forced to reread multiple instruction manuals every single time you need to take an action. What happens next is unpredictable, token burn. And here's the punchline from their critique. The result is that your budget is getting touched by overhead that often has nothing to do with the current task. So even if the tool or OpenClaw is like available to download for free, the way it runs can be very expensive because you're hooking in like multiple APIs and other things as well, right? Now let me talk about the second myth because I've been seeing a lot of YouTube videos on how people are setting up OpenClaw on Mac Minis and everything. I want to say that you don't need a Mac Mini. If you go on Amazon, Mac Minis are not cheap, okay? So let me just kill that myth. You don't need a Mac Mini to run OpenClaw. A Mac Mini is just like one hosting option, okay? People like it because it feels tangible and it feels like it's yours and it runs on your own local network and it can be stable if you keep it simple. But to be honest, like a cloud server can do the job too for cheaper, right? And sometimes even better. And I think that if you're starting out, maybe just go with a cloud, okay? So here's the real decision. Like if you want to go with like a local machine, like I mean like your Mac Mini server, some advantage of going that way is that like you get fixed hardware you can control. Potentially is lower long-term cost if you're running it like 24/7. You don't get any cloud surprises. But then the disadvantages with that is that you are now the IT department, okay? So you need to be technical to understand that. Networking gets really tricky. They're talking about things like remote access, secure channels, certificates, power or internet outages are your problem. Patching and backups are your responsibility, right? Now, let me talk about if you want to go with like a cloud server, like maybe you want to host it on AWS, for example. An advantage is that you're accessible from anywhere, easier snapshots, backups, scaling is possible, often easier to integrate with other cloud services, right? But the cons with that is that you would have monthly bills, misconfigurations can expose you to the internet, and you still need to understand deployment basics. So just think about the pros and cons here and then decide on whether you want to go with the cloud or you want to self-host it yourself, let's say on a Mac Mini. So no, you don't necessarily need a Mac Mini, but you need a plan, okay? So if someone tells you this, just grab a Mac Mini and you're done, they are actually lying to you, right? Because they are skipping the parts where you still have to operate the thing. And operating OpenClaw, trust me, is not that simple, okay? So now let me talk about the third myth, okay? So the third myth is the fact that OpenClaw is open source, so it means that it's cheap. No, it's not cheap. Okay. This is the one that gets people a lot because I have people who message me and like you're thinking, oh, it's open source, so it's free, right? No. Open source just means that the code is available. It does not mean that the system is going to run for free. If you're running an agent system, it costs money in three buckets. The first one is models, right? If your agents are hitting LLM APIs, you pay for tokens. And if your system is stacking prompts every cycle, you have to pay more. The other thing has to do with like tooling and integrations, okay? So browser automation, search APIs, email APIs, data extractions, those often require keys, coders, and paid tiers, right? And then the third thing, infrastructure, right? So whether you're going to be using a Mac Mini or you're using a cloud server, you need to pay for that. There's storage, there's databases, there's observability. You're paying somewhere. Even if you keep it lean, like maybe you're installing it on your laptop, you're still going to be paying for something, okay? And even if you run multiple agents, multiple triggers, multiple workflows, it adds up really fast. And I know this because I set up 9 AI agents, and after I ran one simple query, my API cost was just over the roof, right? When context balloons, you're basically setting up money on fire. So if your expectation is like you having like a free digital employee, you're going to have a bad time. Okay, you're really going to have a bad time. Now, let's talk about myth number 4. Security is handled. And I know that Andre Carpati has already talked about the fact that OpenClaw is a security nightmare, right? So now let me talk about the parts that people love to minimize, right? Which is really security. Here's the deal. An agent platform is powerful because it can do things, okay? It has file system access, it has browser access, it has credentials, automation triggers, potentially messaging and email, right? It has all of that. Now, that power is exactly what creates risk. That power you have, that power that you give to OpenClaw is exactly what creates risk. And the problem isn't just hackers, right? It's also things like prompt injection through web pages. It's also things like accidental data exposure in logs. It's also things like leaked API keys, overly broad permissions, tools that can delete or overwrite files, insecure endpoints if you expose the UI incorrectly. You don't need to be paranoid, you just need to be realistic. If you are going to be running something like this, especially for your business, for a production system, you should really be thinking about things like least privilege for keys, separate accounts for testing versus production, network isolation, audit logs, save defaults, and a way to shut it down fast when something goes weird. Okay. You shouldn't just start with OpenClaw because like everyone is talking about it. You really need to think about security. Okay, it's about security by design, right? Now, the other thing is the orchestration problem, like the digital assistant claims versus sequencing reality. Now, for the part that matters most, if you want this to be like a real assistant, then think about orchestration, right? So people want reliable step-by-step execution, like pull data from spreadsheets, open a browser, enter the data, confirm submission, email the result, log the outcome, right? That requires sequencing you can trust, right? Now, going back to the Reddit post, okay, the veteran developer critique basically said that they don't see a clear path that guarantees ordered execution without you reinventing more structure. And the moment you add more structure, you create more questions. Things like which skill gets priority, which tool loads into context, how do you keep content from getting huge? How do you make it reliable without constantly babysitting it, right? So at the end of the day, you end up with a system that can be both unreliable for practical tasks and risky because it still has power. Now, that's a brutal combo, okay? Now, let me talk about the uncomfortable comparison here, okay? Simpler tools can achieve the same goal you're trying to achieve with OpenClaw. And that's a fact, okay? So this part is a bit spicy, okay? So this same veteran critique basically said that for many real world use cases, you can get already similar outcomes with simpler stacks. And as someone who builds AI automation in N8N, I can attest to that, okay? In this Reddit post, they pointed to Google's tooling, specifically automated browsing plus local file operations, roughly around a low monthly cost for far less set up, fewer moving parts. Now, whether you agree with that exact comparison or not, the underlying point still matters, right? If your goal is results and not just tinkering, then the simplest tool that reliably ships wins. And this means that for a lot of people, that might be a browser automation tool, a structured workflow tool like N8N, Make, or Zapier, a single model assistant with carefully scoped permissions, or a hosted agent platform with guardrails. Now, OpenClaw can still be cool, but it's not automatically the best choice for I just want it to work. Because, like I mentioned, setup can be a nightmare and things are not standard, okay? Things are not standard. It's not easy. It's new. Getting information online, it's not simple, okay? Honestly, if there are easier options to use, why not, okay? So, who do I think needs to use OpenClaw? Here is the most honest way I want to frame this, okay? OpenClaw is for builders. I don't think OpenClaw is for people who are not willing to build or thinker, okay? So people who like reading documentation, people who don't panic when logs appear, people who can debug configs, understand the basics of deployments, and are comfortable owning the operational burden. Those are the people that OpenClaw will suit best, right? And if that's you, you might love it, right? But I don't think OpenClaw is ideal for people who want something that is just like a quick plug and play, okay? Because even comparing the setup for OpenClaw and N8N, I feel like N8N is way easier to use, right? It's not for people who can't troubleshoot when something breaks. It's not for people who need reliability today without investing time into engineering it. And it's definitely not something you should expose publicly without understanding what that implies. I'm going to do another video on how you can do this securely, and I'm going to post that video sometime this week. So no, I don't think the project is bad. I'm just wrapping up here. I don't think the project is bad. I think the marketing around it is too oversimplified. And when creators oversimplify this stuff, beginners blame themselves. They end up spending a lot of time trying to set it up, engineer it, and everything, when really the expectation was wrong. Honestly, I've done a tutorial already on my channel on this. I'm going to leave it on the screen so that you can watch it. I can also do another breakdown on course categories to watch. And I'm also definitely going to do a video on the security guard rules that matter most, right? I want to know if you've tried out OpenClaw, how has your experience been? Do you think that the hype is worth it? Do you think people are not being honest about what really they're able to do with OpenClaw? Just let me know in the comment section below. If you need help with setting up OpenClaw, then I can help with that as well. You can just send me an email or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That is it for today's video. And if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button and see you in the next one.